Welcome to Cisco Tech Beat, the podcast that explores the people and stories behind what inspires the newest innovation. I'm your host, AB, and today I'm welcoming Joe Vaccaro, GM for Cisco ThousandEyes. ThousandEyes is an incredible technology that allows our customers to see any performance disruption across any network they rely on, be it internal, the internet, cloud, or SaaS, so that they can instantly identify issues and enable quick resolutions to maintain great digital experiences and smooth online services. Joe, so great to meet you. Welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
You got it. First of all, let me just say congrats on being named GM of ThousandEyes. I mean, you're not new to ThousandEyes. Of course, before this, you were and still are head of product. So you've really had a chance to have insight into the evolution of ThousandEyes. So I have a couple quick questions. What is it that makes ThousandEyes technology so unique? And as the new GM, what's your vision for ThousandEyes as you look to the future?
Yeah, first off, great question. And, ThousandEyes would be nothing without the people behind ThousandEyes. And, we have a world-class team that's been with us a long time. Going back to the founding, Mohit and Ricardo, and how they had the foresight to think about how the world was going to change. If you think about the world even 10 years ago to today, some macro shifts have changed in the way that people think about digital experiences.
Right.
It started with where our workloads were running. They used to be fully inside of our customers' premises, and as they shifted more rapidly into cloud provider networks. And, the application we use used to be fully in IT's control, and they're getting replaced at a pretty rapid pace by external or SaaS applications.
Right.
Where each of us work as on a daily basis is probably more often than not going to be at home or connected to a network not managed by IT. And obviously, like you and I are talking today, the networks that use to connect the world are no longer networks that are in the control of IT. They're powered by the internet. And, what's common across all four of those, if you think about cloud, you think about SaaS applications, you think about the places where we work and the networks that we use to connect people, places, and things, they're largely outside of IT's control. And if that's true, you needed to take a fundamental different approach to how do you gain visibility to it. You can't walk up and say, I want to take a packet capture of a service provider's network switch. So you had to fundamentally rethink how we provide that visibility. You needed to provide, in many ways, like the Google Maps of the internet that allows you to see everywhere from all the places you care about to all the destinations you rely upon as if you own it. And that's really at the center of what we do and really what powers us and fuels us into the future.
I love it. So as you now embark on this new role, but within an organization that you have so much familiarity with, is it kind of more of the same, or do you have specific ideas as to how it might change a little bit, or how you might approach your GM role?
The vision hasn't changed. I think it's continually evolved. And as we think about those macro trends, our vision is really, how do we empower our customers to do three things that we think are fundamentally important. You need to be able to see every digital experience like you own it. You need to be able to understand that digital experience and what happens across that complex digital supply chain. And importantly, you need to be able to put that intelligence into action so you can not only know you have a problem, but understand how do you resolve that problem. And so, we make investments for innovation across those three different vectors. And, we think about, the power of ThousandEyes being part of Cisco is that, Cisco's in a unique place in that it not only delivers digital experiences in ways such as through WebEx and how we can be able to partner to be able to assure WebEx, but also, how we think about Cisco being present on millions, if not billions of endpoints already when you think about from a security with AnyConnect and now Secure Client and otherwise. And so, over the past few years, we've worked really diligently to ensure that the vantage points from where you want to measure your digital experience are available in the places. And many times for our customers, those are going to be on Cisco devices. But importantly, right? We continue to operate and know that the world is a heterogeneous place, and we need to be able to see across every network, not just Cisco networks. And that's very much core to what we do. Now as we think about in the future and how we can extend our visibility, there's some really interesting ways we can be able to do that, for how we can be able to stretch a visibility as it traverses inside of cloud provider networks, and how do we go deeper to understanding what's happening inside of an enterprise network, and how we can be able to make that intelligence really easy for customers and IT and operations teams to be able to understand, so they can put that intelligence into action.
I'm so glad you're focusing on digital experiences, because obviously ThousandEyes is becoming the de facto digital experience assurance solution across Cisco, and beyond Cisco, as you mentioned just a while ago. And of course, in terms of digital experiences, the ability to see and analyze data is key to driving those experiences. So you touch upon this a little bit, but I'm curious as to specific types of data, or the examples of the types of data ThousandEyes collects, and how that data is used to improve overall user experience.
Yeah, when you think about digital experience, what does that really make up? And I think it's great you brought up that question, right? So first off, we have to say that digital experience many times originates on the user's device itself, and you need to understand the context of what's happening on that device, whether that's a laptop device or otherwise. And it ends all the way in the application that you're consuming, right? That might be a SaaS application like Slack or WebEx or Microsoft Teams. And so one thing you need to understand is that the type of data means you need to understand and traverse every part of the digital supply chain, or every part of the all the different domains that make that up. Not only the device and the device health, the wireless and the wireless segment, the access or LAN, the WAN, the internet, the service provider, the cloud provider, the application, and you need to be able to bring that together in an easy to consume way. Now, I think the other aspect, when you think about the data we collect, the reality is that disruptions happen, but they potentially show up in different ways, and then they are localized at different parts in different items, right? That complexity is only increasing.
Right.
We see routinely where users are complaining about, say, hey, an increase in page load performance for a critical application that is actually localized all the way down into a BGP misconfiguration that's done by a provider that's completely outside of IT's control or even awareness. And so from a ThousandEyes perspective, you need to understand application and application performance, such as page load or transaction times, and then be able to correlate that across the different layers, whether that's a layer 4 metric or a layer 3 or a layer 2, and really bring that together and allow our customers to see that thread and see how they can be able to continue to drill down, so that they can actually create that level of understanding of how a page load or an increase in page load time is directly correlated to maybe a change in a BGP peering with an upstream provider that you had no awareness to.
It's incredible how many things have to be taken into account in terms of the visibility and knowing what's going on where. It's almost overwhelming, especially for somebody like me who's not that techy.
Yeah. I mean, if you just think about, from that analogy, right? In many ways, it's kind of going back to the, people have heard about this notion of a butterfly effect, where, you might have a butterfly in Japan that causes a tornado in, Kansas. And in many ways, you think about digital experience in that same way, right?
Right.
What is thought to be a minuscule change completely outside of the knowledge of an IT organization can cause potentially catastrophic effects for how people can access applications. So, how do you bring that together? How do you create those relationships in a way that really empowers IT to understand and kind of regain that control of how do they break down and understand the digital experiences that not only empower their employees to be productive, but in many ways, right, power the ways that their customers are accessing their business and driving revenue for their business.
Absolutely. So you mentioned disruptions, and I wanted to talk about a tool that ThousandEyes has that I'm aware of and know fairly well, because as part of the newsroom, when it was launched, we had this as a showcased feature, which is the outages map, or the internet outages map, which is really a visual tool that displays real-time information about global network and application outages. So I find it fascinating, and it's really cool to look at. How does that technology actually work? And is there any way that you could give a real-world example of how it was used to identify a major global outage?
Yeah. First off, it's great. So, for those, if they just go to thousandeyes.com/outages, you can see firsthand that kind of real-time view on the health of the internet. And, you brought up a really great point, which I think I wanted to maybe come on back to, is that, people think of the internet as a single monolithic thing. But not only is it really a network of networks, we really should think about the internet as a living organism. It is constantly changing the same way that our bodies are constantly changing. And from that perspective, how do you really understand the health of this entity, this internet at a global basis? And really that's kind of the idea behind Internet Insights, which is, ThousandEyes, we're in a unique position where, the thousands of customers that we run generate billions of points of measurement from each of those different tests. And in many ways, we're traversing the internet across every different combination from all these different locations to all these different destinations. And from that, we're in a unique position to bring that intelligence together in a collective way where we could say, we're actually seeing an issue between multiple different customers and multiple different tests, all localized to the same point. And why that's really valuable, if you think about, an analogy, we've all been faced with this within our homes. Imagine you're in your home and all of a sudden your lights flicker and you're like, that's weird. And then all of a sudden the power goes out. What's the first thing we all do? Well, we walk outside of our house, we look left, we look right and say, hey, is our neighbor's power out right. as well? Because it helps us to understand the situation. Is this a problem that's just a me problem, or is this a broader problem? All right, because in that situation, if it's just a me problem, I know, hey, I probably need to get an electrician to my house. But if it's a we problem, if it's a neighborhood problem, I know like, hey, this is something bigger than just me, and I need to maybe take a different approach to how I'm going to approach that. So you can think of Internet Insights in that same way, which says, if a customer is using ThousandEyes to test to a specific application, and we can say during your test, we can see a drop in a particular metric or a disruption that's happening within your own test to that destination. And at the same time, Internet Insights is saying there's a macro problem happening at the same point in time. That's really valuable intelligence. It helps operations teams know what is the appropriate course of action. In some ways, right, today, I think the world relies too much on checking status pages for updates. The reality is status pages are not a real-time source of information. Uh-huh. And in many ways, you can view Internet Insights as your real-time status page for the critical providers and the critical applications you rely upon that help you to understand that global health of the internet. We see this, time and time again, the top SaaS applications, the top, internet service providers and others, they have disruptions, and having that information, that intelligence at your fingertips is really critical for helping our customers understand what they can do about it when disruptions do happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've been witness to several disruptions that ThousandEyes was actually able to identify the root cause of. I mean, at least as far as I know, right?
Yeah, when we think about outages, and in many ways, like outages don't always unfold universally. For something, you might think that your favorite application is down, and you're blaming, that application and application provider. But the reality is there might be a hop along that path, which is really the source of the problem. And now you might say like, well, I can't do anything about it. But the reality is that in that situation, the application is not down. It's actually your path to the application, which is the problem. And if you're empowered with that intelligence as an IT organization, as an operations team, there are things you can do. You can redirect your routes around that problem so that your employees can still access those critical applications. You don't just have to kind of throw up your hands and say, I'm just going to wait it out. There are ways and techniques. And really, I think in many ways, that's the power of what Cisco can help our customers do, is to move from monitoring to assurance, is really the ability to say, how can I take this intelligence and put it into action so that you can be able to increase your level of digital resiliency within those critical digital experiences that you rely upon.
Absolutely. And on a local scale, we just this past March experienced something at Cisco where we had an issue with WebEx. We thought it had crashed. Everybody was like, "What's up with WebEx?" It's our tool, our everyday tool. But ThousandEyes was able to determine that the cause of the issue was actually an external one. What happened there?
Yeah, that's it's a great example, right, of how digital experiences and disruptions are no longer monolithic and many times easy to understand. In that situation, we had employees inside of Cisco that were struggling to join meetings on WebEx. And as you mentioned, right, the logical thing is to blame the application provider and say like, hey, why can't you run your application? But the reality also was interesting is that users were still able to load web pages. When you think about you're working from home and you can't load your favorite application, what do is you probably fire up a web browser, you type google.com and say like, hey, is my internet up? And in that situation, the internet or the path to the majority of destinations on the internet was working fine. It was only the path to these applications and parts of their applications that were hosted in a cloud provider where that traffic or that part of that traffic was being disrupted by an outage in a middle mile provider along that path. And we saw this firsthand, as you mentioned, within Cisco's own employees that were here in maybe San Francisco that were having problems within the San Francisco office. And as you mentioned, not only were they maybe blaming WebEx, they're probably saying like, hey, Cisco Wireless is having a problem with the outage. And, people working from home were saying, hey, my local internet provider is having an outage. But the reality was it was that middle mile. And so what ThousandEyes was able to do in real time was to not only say, here's the set of users that were having the issue across not only people that were in the office, people that were working from home, because each of them had the endpoint agent running on their laptop device.
Right.
But also we were able to say, here are the applications that were impacted. It was localized not to every application, but to a set of applications, including WebEx, including Slack and otherwise. And then from that, we're able to then see along the path where the problem existed. In this case, it was that middle mile provider that was dropping the traffic on the path to the cloud provider where key parts of that application were hosted. And so that complexity, brought up in that example, I think really helps to illustrate what our customers deal with every day and really what the power of ThousandEyes can do when you have ThousandEyes giving you that extra intelligence and that extra set of understanding to be able to not only detect when you have a problem, but to localize and diagnose. And then from that, help you to be able to remediate and mitigate that problem.
So it's not just a technology solution that customers buy. You have a whole internet intelligence team that analyzes cloud and internet outages. And then you share that analysis quickly with the general public. So I'm curious, what kind of reports can be generated using ThousandEyes, and can those be customized based on a particular customer?
Great question. I think that maybe the first way I'll answer that is that many times, ThousandEyes is accused of being a t-shirt company masquerading as a technology company. And so I think we're not just known for technology, but you've seen many of our different t-shirts out there, and go ahead and blame the network and the notorious BGP and some of these others that really kind of resonate with the type of problems that people have who run large scale networks. But the question is that this powerful data can be used not just to understand the networks, but look at it from a research perspective and what are you trying to solve for? One of the great examples of that is that generally on a yearly basis, we produce what we refer to as our cloud performance benchmark report, which is we take all this data from all these different vantage points around the world, testing to all the different cloud providers, and we look at different trends and try to help our customers understand that not only is that not every cloud designed the same, but not every connectivity in every region is homogeneous, which means that let's just say you wanted to use Azure, just because Azure performs well in the US doesn't mean that Azure is going to be your best choice when you're in APJC.
Right.
The second thing, right, is through this level of analysis, right, we help our customers to uncover where there are potentially even, hidden points of convergence, regardless of what cloud provider you have, right? For instance, right, looking at, how are the cloud providers that are connecting between, say, Southeast Asia and India, traversing the same undersea cables, regardless of what cloud you choose, which means that if that's a critical connectivity within your business, you should just be aware of that level of dependency for a disruption that might be caused. And so, that's a couple of examples. And I think what it comes down to is that, people spend significant amount of time in energy and resources to go out and deploy a network or deploy an application.
Right.
And what we find is that this level of analysis can be really helpful to make strong decisions up front that can avoid maybe pain down the road. Maybe one way for how customers can bring that even more personal to them. We had a customer that early on that wanted to use ThousandEyes about de-risking their SD-WAN deployment. They were moving from a traditional MPLS to an SD-WAN based network, and they were rolling it out around the world, hundreds of different sites. And what they said is, hey, ThousandEyes, can you help us to determine what is the best ISP in each of those different locations to select? Right. And actually, that's a great use case for ThousandEyes. They deployed the Vantage Point on that edge router. They tested for multiple different ISP links to a destination, and then they use that to compare and contrast. And what they're actually able to find is that, actually one provider, while it showed better performance, had significant time of day congestion where the latency would spike during that traditional work hours.
Right.
And so if you're running a business and your employees are reliant on that SD-WAN network during the peak work hours, it doesn't matter if they do give you a better service, and it doesn't matter if when you test it at 2 a.m. that it's flawless.
Right.
What matters is that when your users are there,
right,
are they going to deliver? And so that notion of using ThousandEyes about a planning use case is really valuable, and maybe one of the hidden capabilities where customers can really push ThousandEyes to deliver even more value for them.
That's amazing. And sometimes you don't think about efficiency when you think about, the ability to deal with outages and stuff like that, but using it in a work environment to have your workers really be as efficient as possible, finding those pain points, and then, sort of restructuring or doing whatever the company has to do to expedite things. I think that's a great use case. You mentioned underwater cables. I totally forgot that those still actually exist.
I mean, the internet is, wholly reliant generally on undersea cables. Like that is, we talk about, how, your cloud, we have a t-shirt that says your cloud runs on my network, but we should have another one that says your internet is dependent upon my cables, which is the reality, right? Is that that infrastructure powers ultimately how applications get delivered. And there's a, complex series of dependencies that really help us to deliver this magic that we call the internet today.
I can see the visual for the shirt. I can even see an animation with a C cable and then how it morphs into sort of like, providing service and internet connection. That's awesome. Love that. I am going to actually shift away from work, which I think is a good time to do it now, because I want to talk about a few things in your life outside work and did some research, and I know that you actually come from an agricultural family. And from what I have learned, you're pretty much the only person in your family who didn't pursue a career in agriculture. So I'd love to hear more about that, specifically, where you grew up, what kind of agriculture business your family is involved in, and then what got you interested in a field beyond agriculture.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. It makes for quiet conversations at the Thanksgiving dinner table when people say, hey, Joe, how's work going?
Right.
But I guess I'm the black sheep of the family, but yeah. So my family kind of history going back into to the 80s and before I was born. My father and grandfather started a company that produced hybrid sunflower seed for companies around the world in Northern California. On annual, we would produce roughly about, say, 30,000 acres of sunflower.
Wow.
And it was a phenomenal business, and I deeply have a tremendous amount of gratitude to my dad and grandfather for teaching me, because a lot of the lessons that we bring into Thousand Eyes about leadership, about business, about how to make hard decisions, and also how to work hard, or were learned and observed by watching them.
Sure.
And that's deep appreciation. I think also, just being in agriculture and just seeing the fruit of your labor every day that you go out there and do that hard work has helped instill in me how do I approach my own career. And I think sunflowers are and really interesting, because if you think about what's so unique about sunflowers, is that throughout the day, if you've ever seen a time lapse video, sunflowers actually track the sun, and it's such a unique thing. And in many ways, it's still a kind of a mystery for how they do that. But the power of what they do in terms of harnessing the sun, I think we can use that and kind of like apply that analogy to how we should think about the business, right?
Absolutely.
How do we continue to shape our strategy and shape our investments to be able to maximize the potential that we have? How do we continue to follow our customers to understand their problems? And so I think it's a kind of an apt part of my background for where I came from, and how I think about the future and future of my own career.
I love that. So much to be learned. Well, nature's a great teacher, and so it's great. It's great to be able to use that experience and apply it to the real world in terms of your role now. And of course, I don't know much about farming, but I know that it requires a lot of hard work, and certainly a lot can be learned from the stance of a work ethic anyway from that. So that's great. Digging deeper to more hobby type activities, I've heard also that you are somewhat of a fanatic e-bike lover. And and that sometimes you can be seen riding that bike around town where you live, even running some errands. So what got you into e-biking, and what makes you love it so much?
Yeah, I think in many ways, I'm a man of efficiency, and living in the Bay Area and kind of where we lived, during the pandemic, what we realized is that a lot of what we do, and probably this could be applied even more generally, is generally maybe even confined to a few mile radius around your house. And so I purchased during the pandemic an e-bike that had a kind of a cargo spot where I could put my two kids on.
Nice.
And it became our second car for my wife and I, and actually in many ways our preferred car, because not only when I was trying to pick up my kids from school, I could zoom past the traffic and cars waiting in line to get into the parking lot and just ride right up there. But also my kids, they prefer it, right? There's nothing better than riding along and kind of feeling that wind and kind of having your kids say go faster. So it became just something that we just desired to do, and brought a lot of enjoyment. The exercise is nice. I try not to use the E in e-bike. I try to use it as little as possible.
Right.
But when you're trying to get up a big hill, it sure is nice, and you got two kids on your back.
Oh yeah,
sure is nice to have a little assist.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, if I were carrying, well, my son's 17 and my stepson's 11. If I were carrying them on an e-bike, I would definitely need that assist going up a hill for sure. And you guys have a lot more hills in San Fran than we do around here, but totally get that. Sticking with that outdoors theme, and I can relate to this. I know you're an outdoors person. You really do love being outside. I likewise love the outdoors. I mean, if I could live in a camper van at some point in my life, I'd be very happy. So what does your dream outdoor experience look like?
No, yeah. I mean, if I could design my optimum 24 hours, I would probably start it on the ski slopes, and probably ski the first half of the day. I would spend maybe I guess I would try to fit in maybe a round of golf, and then I would spend my evenings fly fishing on the river. And if I could do that that triple threat in a day, I think that would be, my optimum day. I've always been from a early childhood and an avid skier, and my family got that into it. I think I was probably only a few years old when I first put on the skis, and
Right.
That's kind of my happy place, being up in the mountains. We try to get up there as often as we can. I have family in Northern California, in the Mount Shasta area, which is a phenomenal mountain for backcountry skiing and world-class fly fishing. And so it's a bit of a magnet for, where I like to spend my time outside of work.
That sounds amazing. I've actually never gone fly fishing. That's the one of those activities I haven't done yet, which I would really, really love to try. It just seems like it would be just the experience, whether you catch a fish or not, just that peaceful nature of just being out there. It must be so soothing.
Yeah, it's definitely a moment of zen. You're hearing the kind of the river, the creek, and just that sound, and kind of the birds and the wind through the trees, and then just the very therapeutic of casting back and forth, and then mixed in with the magic and the excitement when a fish hits your fly. It's truly a magical feeling.
Love it. That's such a great visual. That is probably the best place for us to wrap this up. Joe, thank you so much for participating in the Tech Meet podcast. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your time. Look forward to speaking again, hopefully in person, maybe at one of the big events. We can talk more things: security, ThousandEyes, outdoors activities, you name it. I would love to chat again.
Appreciate it, AB. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you.